The ashram was open only on the weekends, so we would come out Friday night, driving Swamiji and Guruji and our son, and then on Sunday night come back. Early on, I was given the name of Mother of the Ashram. So if I were Mother of the Ashram, I was only in my 30s, then he had to be the grandfather of the ashram. My memories of him were mostly of him smiling and laughing, because when he was with Sri Brahmananda, then Dr. Mishra, they carried on in Hindi, and they usually ended up in total laughter. Guruji, after the program of Vedantic readings and chanting, Guruji would turn over the latter part of the evening to Swamiji. And he would try to caution him. And he'd say, Swamiji, only 15 minutes remaining. At most 20 minutes, Swamiji. And Swamiji would look at him very sincerely and say, I know people need rest, it is late. I will do a little bit chanting. But it was to no avail, because once Swamiji went into that divine chanting, the bhakti chanting, he lost all sense of time and space every time he chanted. And it was seldom that it was less than an hour. And Guruji knew it. It was his joke with Swami Bhaktivedanta. He was serious only when he was chanting or talking about Krishna consciousness. But when he was relating to people, and certainly relating to Guruji, his face would light up. He had a radiance because he was happy. When Swamiji was happy, it showed. He, I guess because he did a lot of traveling on his own, had become self-sufficient in the kitchen. And he also loved, absolutely loved, to make meals for Guruji. And he would make a lot of food. So we knew when Swamiji was cooking that he could serve about 20 people, although he was cooking mainly for Guruji. And we would gather around as he was cooking. We wanted to learn from him what he was doing. So we would ask him questions, and he wouldn't answer because he'd be totally absorbed in his moment-to-moment activity. And although we were in a happy mood because we were anticipating a lovely meal and being with the two of them, he just remained serious until the last morsel was being finished. And he was just one-pointed in everything he did. I always felt about him he was a deeply serious man, serious about life. He never talked about his past, his personal life. I did ask him once or twice, question here and there, and he waved it away. He said, not important. That's not important. And then I began to feel it wasn't important. What was important was what he was doing now. There's only once when he touched me so much, I asked if I could hug him. He said something like, why not? Because nobody touched him usually. Guruji did. He would put his arm around him. But this was after I knew him for a while. But it was the Indian way of hugging. You know, somehow they managed to hug you and be miles apart in the hug. But at the same time, although the bodies were kept apart, it's only really the shoulders that come together. It's Indian style. But I felt Swamiji's love. He was a tender man, he was a caring man, and an innocent man. And in the company of innocency, you relax completely. And so I was always relaxed with Swami Bhaktivedanta.
That's when I decided I wanted to get into film, and when I came back to America, I took 2 courses at Columbia, and then I was lucky enough to get a job with Leacock Pennybaker, who were the preeminent cinema verite documentarians, and there I learned to edit, to take sound, and this film that we're talking about was my first venture as a cameraman. This was entirely on our own, and we selected this because this was a movement that was different. I also was touched by, in a sense, their naivete. One of the people, I remember asking him how he felt. He said, "Oh, this is the most wonderful thing. I am so moved. I want to devote my entire life to this." I said, "How long have you been involved?" He said, "Since yesterday."
We went to the storefront, Matchless Gifts, and I've always been so taken with that sign. I can still remember it. It was beautifully done, so artistic, saying Matchless Gifts, you know, wonderful colors and swirls and everything. So we entered. It was quite a simple room, and they were eating on the floor. And I don't remember any women being among that first group. My feeling about the Swami is that I think he was in some kind of a state, and I think that perhaps he passed something to us in that interview. But at the same time, I was having a very good time. I actually thought we were onto something big. You know, I have a journalist's instinct, but I also have it sounds terrible, a spiritual instinct. You know, after all, this was a very small little room. And the Swami was interviewed by us in the back, in a smaller little room with a curtain over it. So that's, to me, that's where it started. Now, maybe it started before in someplace else, but amazing, we were there. And for me, that's very significant.
Hayagriva first ran into Prabhupada on the street up Bowery, and Prabhupada invited him to come and attend his class that he was holding at 26 Second Avenue. So he came back to the apartment and told me, and so the next night we both went to hear Prabhupada at 26 Second Avenue. And I was very attracted to Prabhupada right from the start. His message rang a bell, and his voice, when he quoted the Sanskrit, it was just like music to me. At any rate, I very quickly became Prabhupada's assistant, and we would cook together for all the people that would come to share Prabhupada's lunch. Everything was put on Prabhupada's plate. And then from Prabhupada's plate, he would distribute chapatis and rice and dal and everything to 10, 15 people that gathered there. And there was always enough. Everyone was always full. We cooked the prasadam in his apartment kitchen, and we served it in his bedroom. We all sat around in a circle on the floor. He had no furniture. The thing that attracted me most to Prabhupada was his certainty. He didn't say, maybe this is the truth, or my opinion is. He wasn't like the professors I knew at Columbia. He spoke with finality. Krishna says in Bhagavad-gītā such and such, this is the way it is. And he was sure.
I was in a very desperate state. I was brought up middle class, Brooklyn Jewish, TV dinner kind of background, kind of pampered, I guess. And here I was out in the streets in a dangerous part of town with no money and affected by LSD and my own unbalanced mind. And so I came to Prabhupada to ask him, rather than asking him, you know, how could I somehow become more stable or some normal approach to my problem, I was just thinking of one thing. And I asked Swamiji, I told him, I work hard all day long. I'm like you. I'm also spreading the word, you know, I'm also speaking to the people. And I thought I was preaching something. And Srila Prabhupada just looked at me, shook his head, and he spoke to me very strongly, and he said, simply join us. We will solve all your problems. Of course, in hindsight, we understand the depth of what Srila Prabhupada was talking about. No more birth, no more death, no more disease, no more old age. At that point, he handed me a cloth. I thought it was a dhoti, and I rejected it. I started stepping backwards. So as I was kind of walking backwards towards the door, I told him that I'm not quite ready, in a very halting manner. And as I was going out the door, Srila Prabhupada had his hand on the door frame, and I distinctly remembered he had a tear coming out of his eyes, and he said, please come back, just like that. And well, I did come back, but I didn't come back the way he wanted me to, right at that moment. I walked out, and I almost got killed by some thugs right around the corner, almost an instant reaction.
I remember his face. I don't remember his body. It's interesting. I remember his face. We did get these wonderful close-ups of his face. That's where his power, his focus, and his calm presence were all gathered in his face. But here, it was the beginning for us for meeting many spiritual masters. And it was also the beginning of the Hare Krishna movement. And it was also the beginning of a trend that grew towards the appreciation of Eastern religions in America.
You know, we had a big tape recorder that weighed 50 pounds. I was in charge of that. Brahmananda would bring it down from Prabhupada's closet every night. So my job was to set up the tape for Prabhupada's lecture. I mean, Prabhupada was very insistent in having his lectures tape recorded. I mean, so much so that when the tape ran out, he would stop and wait for me to rethread the tape with a new one. In those days, we didn't have money, and those tapes were, I remember they were like $3, $4 for Scotch tapes. So Prabhupada wanted everything tape recorded. We didn't think it was important in those days. But now we do. They're important for preaching.
As usual, I just breezed into Srila Prabhupada's apartment, and I said, Swamiji, I'd like to do something to help, as if I were God's gift to the world or to his mission. But immediately, it's almost as if that's what he was waiting for. And immediately, Srila Prabhupada picked up this huge tray of prasadam and handed me this whole tray of prasadam and said, you could be the one who distributes the prasadam to the devotees. Those were his exact words. So I was, okay, I had not only a service, but a whole position now, that I was the prasadam distributor. But unfortunately, I was so spaced out that I was standing on the top of the stairs outside of Prabhupada's apartment to go down to the storefront, and I was just thinking how I'm going to negotiate the stairs and not drop the tray. And some hippie devotees, whoever they were, they grabbed it from me. They didn't have time to wait for this space case to decide how I was going to walk down the stairs, so I lost my service. But I did continue my service of taking prasadam.
In the beginning, there was only one or two who were thinking how to give Prabhupada something instead of just taking from him. Because I had asked Prabhupada, I said, Swamiji, you know, we're here with you, and what are we supposed to do? You know, we come here, we take Krishna Prasadam, then we all go away. But what are we supposed to do for you? What are we here for? I wanted something definite. And Prabhupada said the duty of a disciple is to assist the spiritual master in his work. That's all he said. So then I thought, work? You know, later on I pondered on this subject, work. And I said, Prabhupada doesn't work. What does he do? You know, he doesn't have a job. He's a religious teacher. So then it occurred to me, there's one thing he does do every day, and that's translate books. And he's using this typewriter. Prabhupada wasn't a typist. You know, he used just his index fingers. I mean, that's how he was typing his books. So I was walking one day, because there was 4 or 5 head shops that would carry back to Godhead. And I would always stop in the shops to see if they're selling. So on my way, I passed this Grundig shop, and something in the window caught my eye. It was like a miniature tape recorder, and it said dictaphone. I said, what the hell is a dictaphone? So I went inside, and I went up to the man. I said, what's this dictaphone? He says, well, it's used by lawyers and doctors to keep notes. I go, oh, yeah? I said, I know somebody who's translating books. It would be good for him. He said, oh, yeah. So he showed me how to use it. And I said, you know, I'm going to buy this for Prabhupada. Now I'm helping him, because this will go a lot faster than typing. I mean, practically speaking, the dictaphone revolutionized Prabhupada's book, because he wanted to do the Gita. And so, you know, it would take ages for him to finish typing by hand. So it was like $150, I think. So I brought it to Prabhupada. You know, I was all excited and puffed up. You know, I said, this is, you know, helping Prabhupada. And so I thought, boy, how am I going to show Prabhupada how to use this thing? He's from the village, Vrindavan. They don't know what a dictaphone is. So I brought up to Prabhupada's room and I showed it to him, and, you know, I showed him the mic, you know, and he looked at it. I said, Prabhupada, there's an instruction book here how to use it. I'll go through it with you. He said, no, that's okay, I know. I was shocked. And sure enough, Prabhupada knew. He pressed the right buttons, he was testing it. And I was shocked, he never even looked at the book. It took me an hour with the guy. He had to show me everything. And here I'm showing it to someone from the village, and he didn't have to look at the book. And then I realized that this person, he's not human. I mean, how does he know how to work this thing? He never had one. Prabhupada was very easy with electronics. He wasn't at all intimidated. And then boom, Prabhupada started doing the tapes. I mean, it was great. But then we had the other problem. The tapes were building up, and the tapes were expensive. You know, at the end, we had like 6 or 7 tapes, and we didn't have money to keep buying tapes. For some reason, nobody knew how to type properly, because you have to have coordination. I think because we're all on LSD, nobody could coordinate their foot with their fingers. Because you had to use a foot pedal, and then you had to hear Prabhupada and coordinate, you know, like driving a car. And nobody could do it. So all of a sudden, this Neil shows up. And he's from Antioch College. He has to do a summer course, 3-month course, joining a religious organization and writing about his experience. That was his paper. So he thought, you know, hey, I'll join you guys. He said, I'm going to do it. I said, fine, you know. So immediately asked him, do you know how to type? We just thought we'd ask. He goes, yeah, I can type. I said, do you know how to use a dictaphone? Oh, yeah, that's easy. And right away, the guy started typing 60 words a minute. And we used to watch his foot, man. The foot was going a mile a minute. He knew how to go back and go forward like in a second if he didn't understand anything. I mean, we go, wow. We looked at each other. This is mystical. Because this is the person we needed. And all of a sudden, he shows up, knocking at the door. I mean, you don't know The devotees then had an inner communication with each other. When things like this happen, we look at each other and go, wow, this is mystical. And then we understood that Krishna provides. That was the famous word. Krishna provides. That's why you really felt secure when you were with Prabhupada. Because you felt nothing could hurt you or touch you, and you felt wonderful. You always wanted to be around him because you felt fully protected. That feeling that everything's going to work out when you're with Prabhupada, because everything did work out.
The first dancing was in Tompkins Square Park, myself and Achyutananda. Prabhupada introduced this style of kirtan, which is very, very meditative. You know, when Prabhupada sang in the park, that first time I danced, and Achyutananda got up and we danced. As I was dancing, I felt I should dance with the kirtan, and I should dance as long as Prabhupada has the kirtan. Not that I should stop dancing and sit down. That would somehow be disrespectful to the Swamiji. So I danced for as long as Prabhupada had the kirtan. And Prabhupada had the kirtan for 3 hours, non-stop. He was singing. And that's the way Prabhupada had it. Very long kirtans and very meditative. I once asked Srila Prabhupada, what is the best way to sing kirtan? He replied that you sing in such a way that you never get tired. So that the kirtan should be able to go on endlessly. The New York Times, they came to that kirtan and they took a photograph of Achyutananda and myself, and Prabhupada sitting there. You see the back of Prabhupada's head, and he's holding the bongo drum that he played. The caption was, "The Swami's flock finds ecstasy in the park." Prabhupada said the Times of New York was the most important newspaper in the world. This article, he said, marked the beginning of my movement.
One night I was walking down 2nd Avenue and I heard the ting, 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 ting. And so I walked over and I followed the sound, and it was the Krishna place, and there was Prabhupada, and they were chanting a mantra. And I had read that chanting mantras was the best kind of meditation. So I thought, well, maybe this is what I'm looking for. So I started to go in, but as I went in, I saw Prabhupada was shaking his head from side to side, like not to come in. So I stopped. But then I saw that he was just moving his head in time with the music. So I went in and sat down and started chanting. And then when Prabhupada spoke, he said, the Supreme Absolute Truth is a person. And when he said that, I knew that I had found my spiritual master. Because I had been reading all these Buddhist books that say you cannot describe the truth. You know, you cannot say it is, you cannot say it is not, you cannot say it both is and is not. You cannot say it neither is nor is not. And they never tell you what the truth is. So here somebody told me what the truth was, and it really made sense. So then I started coming regularly. At that time, there was lecture kirtan every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday night. So anyway, after a while, I began to have a little doubt. I thought, well, I can see that the Swami is very honest. He's not cheating, but how do I know he really has knowledge? He could be a very honest man, but also be misled. And while I was thinking this, I didn't say anything to him, but I went to hear him lecture, and he said, I teach only what is in Scripture. So when he said that, then I thought, well, then there's no danger if he only teaches what's in Scripture. So that's how I started coming all the time. And then after a while, some of the guys started to do some kind of a service. And somebody would say, well, I'm doing this for the Swami, or someone else would say, I'm doing that for the Swami. So I thought, well, I'd better get in on this, because I thought he would maybe gather a few disciples and go off to a mountain cave somewhere and give them the secret teachings, you know. So I didn't want to miss out. So I went up to see Prabhupada. And I said, is there something I can do for you? And he said, yes, you can take notes in class and type them up. So the next day I took notes, but I really didn't know what kind of format to write them up with, so I tried something. And I showed it to Prabhupada. And then Prabhupada showed me what he was working on. And it was the essay, Who is Crazy? So then I knew that he wanted me to type the notes up in essay form. And Prabhupada said, and we will one day put all these essays together in a book and call it Practical Theology.
I was cooking for Prabhupada. Then it occurred to me that it would be nice to start a Sunday feast program. I explained to Prabhupada that in this country, people usually gather in their families together on Sunday and have a meal together. So I thought it would be a nice thing to have a love feast on Sunday when we could ask all the hippies and others who wanted to come and have a Krishna conscious feast. Prabhupada said, oh, that is a good idea. And that's the beginning of the love feast. We used to have the place packed every week. Every bit of prasad would be gobbled up. I cooked, Prabhupada cooked, Achyutananda cooked. We handed out flyers. I remember the first flyer, stay high forever. No more coming down. Practice Krishna consciousness.
How familiar these faces are. They are etched in my memory. And also I was very touched, in part because I am aware that this is important for the devotees. And being able to give the film to the movement is more of a gift to us, that we had something of value that was appreciated. And that was very rewarding to us. So it's matchless gifts for us.
On the first day that we went to Tompkins Square Park with Srila Prabhupada, then he had me dance holding up the picture of Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan. But after all, I put it down. Prabhupada said, why did you put it down? I said, well, I got tired. I had no idea what an honor it was to be holding that picture on the first kirtan with Prabhupada in the Western world. And what a momentous occasion it was. Of course, we didn't see this as a momentous occasion. Prabhupada did, but we didn't. To see an Indian man in Indian dress in a park on Tompkins Square with, you know, majority of the people were old Russian and Polish people. You know, it was just too far out. So we used to go, you know, every weekend, Sundays, especially Sundays, you know, to Tompkins Square to chant with Prabhupada. And I would be in the crowd with the leaflets talking and inviting people. We used to make these leaflets called Stay High Forever. You know, people really got a kick out of those. And we used that photograph of Prabhupada where he's sitting and he's smiling and he's got his hand on his head. I mean, you know, that photo was like, people would look at that and say, wow, he is high. He's so high, he's trying to keep himself down just from the mantra.